comments. Okay, so we can get live comments as well. Hello. I'm just dropped my microphone. Okay. Welcome everyone, and welcome to any replay viewers who join us or listen later. This is a live interview with an activist and artist, Joanie Lemercier, who is joining me. I'm very grateful to talk about projects as well as recent activism, your purchase of a domain name against the company Siemens, the Germany company that's facilitating a coal mine in Australia. But first, I will cross over to you, Joanie. Can you tell us a bit about these art projects that I can see up in front of us?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm a visual artist. I'm French and I live in Brussels, and I've been doing projection and art for the past 12 years. And I do a lot of different things, different format projection on transparent screens, in planetariums. I like to do projections on drawings as well, often about nature and geometry and mountain. I'm really happy about what I do. I feel really fortunate to be able to travel and to live from my art. And
that is amazing. That is amazing that you can do this and sustain a viable existence. I'm so happy for you. It's beautiful. What I'm seeing is beautiful.
Thanks. And to be honest, lately I also sort of started to ask myself some important question about why I'm doing this, what's the purpose, what's the meaning. And of course, it's nice to try to create beauty and art. But I also realized that I use technology really heavily. I use computers and projectors, and I started trying to figure out a little bit about what the responsibility of showing and telling that technology is great. And I realized lately that technology was sort of sometimes could be fencing us from reality.
Yes.
The overuse of phones and social media, and so it's something that started to bug me a little bit, and I was not so I started reflections about this and the meaning of promoting technology and overall like promoting
I completely understand you, because it's reminding me as you speak of science fiction stories I read as a young girl, in which people would perhaps have alternate realities plugged straight into their heads, that we're getting these dopamine hits from nature still, but with this layer of artifice, this layer of removal that maybe is deluding us, that we're so sophisticated we don't really need nature anymore.
I see what you mean. Exactly. That's exactly the sort of question I had in my mind, and I wasn't sure. So that right now in 2020, I have also this perspective on my work and how maybe making the promotion of technology, and it's something I should consider more, and that I should I should just consider. But anyway, I feel really lucky to do all these projects. And it's great, but something I'm going to tell you a little story of what happened last year.
Yes.
Almost by accident, I think I discovered like a video from a French blogger. He does vlogs, and he was in this coal mine in Germany. And to be honest, I thought coal mines were a thing of the past, and I was really surprised to see the images of this big open pit coal mine, which actually just 2 hours outside Brussels.
Yeah.
So what struck me the most is the fact that there's this huge coal mine, and I've never heard of, and it's just there.
It's so close to what you think of as civilized society.
Absolutely, it's amazing.
On the margins.
It's like 2.5 hours from Amsterdam. It's very close to Frankfurt. And I was amazed that we don't hear about and we don't talk about these places. So that was my first oh, what's going on? What is this thing? So I went on site and I started this little thread on Twitter, which was my way to sort of tell the story of how I discovered the mine. So this is the mine seen from, it's a satellite view.
Yes.
And it's actually 8 miles wide, 8 kilometers wide, and 5 kilometers long. or the opposite. So I was really amazed by this satellite image, and I decided to go and see by myself what was going on. So there's this long thread about the Ambar forest, which is the forest just on the side of the mine, and there are some activists up there. They've been in
Yes.
tree houses for 12 years now. They're trying to protect the forest from being cut.
Yes.
So I started documenting.
12 years. Wow.
It's been 12 years, yeah, since the first people moved at the top of the trees. And to be honest, they were really lonely for the first 8 years, I think. And luckily, the media started covering this story. And for the past 3-4 years, they're getting a lot of public support. They're gaining a lot of attention. A lot of people actually going there to show some support. And I guess people like me, which I really wasn't interested in activism or anything political. I was really happy with my projection and shiny thing. And since I discovered this place, this amazing story, now I go on a regular basis, and I want to show my support, and I want to also help them, and I want to be them, basically, to sort of symbolically stand to sort of save the forest, and by extension save the planet. But yeah, so it was a really powerful story that I discovered, and that now sort of turned me into an activist, I guess.
So it was an eye-opener for you, and consequently you're using your artist's eyes to bring that story visually to the rest of us, because we're drawn in visually. We see what's happening, and it's more potent sometimes than just reading details in an article, to see the extent of that mine in a satellite image, and to realize, yes, this is all activity that goes on outside the margins of our consciousness. And you bring that back into our consciousness and say, contend with it. Like you've taken a position, and there'll be other people who aren't as drawn to activism as you are, but to even consider it, to consider the pursuit of coal, and maybe for people to even take an interest in how heavily coal is subsidized across the developed world. To know that the governments could be putting energy into scaling up renewable energy systems, but instead there's this pursuit of the status quo, the coal status quo. And when we see what devastation that is to forests, and when we see what devastation that is to the sky. So I'm just looking now at this picture of output from a coal-fired electricity plant. You can really visually see the contribution.
Yeah, I think it's the lack of knowledge that doesn't. That's the reason why we're not all there to do something. I feel really sad when I realized I should have been aware of this for a much longer time. I've always been sort of sensitive to the ecological question, but I realized I haven't done anything in my entire life to actually. I've done like little things which are really important. But on a larger scale, I'm not really aware of where my electricity is coming from. I'm not really aware of the impact of all this. So now I think, as you said, like images are a really strong conveyor to tell those stories. So I started doing more research, and I started doing drone images of these locations.
Yes.
This place is it looks like the end of the world, to be honest. What you see here is the Ambar coal mine. There used to be a forest right there. It's only 10% remains now. So all what you see here, it was a 12,000 years old forest. And what you see in the background here, those are the fumes. It's actually water vapor from the three of the most polluting coal plants in Europe. There are actually 4 around the mine. So the coal is being extracted and is being burned right away. So there's a train that takes the coal to the power plants. And basically those images I found them very symbolically strong, because it's also what we're doing to the entire planet, not just in this location, but in every continent, wherever we keep burning coal, and the fact we don't really pay attention to what's going on when we use electricity.
Can we go back to the Twitter post that you made, just a little bit up higher, where you put some of the contents of that vapor. There, just down a little bit more.
Yeah.
The white fumes, almost beautiful, and then there, because it also contains mercury, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, fine particles, lead, cadmium, carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
And when we talk about that, we add to people's understanding and we add meaning to this conversation. So I wanted to stop there and talk about that, because with the bushfires in Sydney, the phrase fine particles wouldn't have conveyed any particular terror to me. But now I'm like, oh yes, now I have learned that finer particulate matter is more adhesive to lung tissue. So fine particles, I read that and I'm like, that's deadly for human beings.
Absolutely.
And I've heard that for every coal mine that's every coal-fired electricity station that's closed, deaths fall in the region, deaths from asthma and deaths from cancer and deaths from heart attack because of all of those elements. I mean, mercury we know is a brain toxin, and we laugh at but we deride previous centuries for having Mad Hatter's disease because they were ignorant of the potency of mercury as a brain toxin, and they just perhaps presumed it was a coincidence or took a while to twig, or took a while to have adequate labor laws that could respond to the fact that people were working with a toxic substance that was literally driving them all mad. The hatters, Mad Hatters, people who worked with hats, who used mercury to give hats their shape, were over the course of their profession being driven mad. So when I see that now and I go, look, that's the contents of these coal factories pouring out mercury into the air. That's depleting people's brain health, as well as the fine particulate matter degrading their lung health. These are leading to deaths. These are toxic chemicals that we don't need to be subsidizing. The fact that our taxpayer dollars are subsidizing these apocalyptic visions so heavily is it's distressing to confront it, but so important to overcome that complacency and that blissful ignorance that you were sort of referring to before, so that people do grow in knowledge and bring that knowledge to the table, because that knowledge, when it hits a critical mass of people who know, becomes action and becomes a factor in who people vote for. And in Australia, it's so obvious at the moment that those in power don't consider that we know enough about it. They consider that the population is still sufficiently ignorant that they can continue to provide billion-dollar subsidies to coal mines in Australia, even as we burn, even as we choke literally to death, even as the life expectancies of Australians are all probably dropping by years at this point because of the amount of toxic smoke in the air, toxic smoke that's also spreading all over the world. I think the plume from Australian bushfire smoke has circled the planet at this point. So it's good that your information is there as well as your images.
And to be honest, I was not aware of all this pollution, and I was expecting naively that the government wouldn't let such terrible thing to happen. My thought process now that I think of it is that I'm sort of, as a French person, we have most of our electricity comes from nuclear, and the big chimneys we have are also it's mostly to refrigerate the core, so it's only water vapor.
It's cool,
it's cooling tower. So when I saw those towers, I would expect them just to be cooling towers, but then I discovered, I learned about the fine particles, and this particular coal mine in Embar has those three very polluting power plants, and one is quite new, so it's a little less polluting, which doesn't make enormous sense.
Donald Trump likes to call it clean coal. Clean coal,
yeah,
all the problems have gone away.
Makes no sense, but and this site actually kills 1,800 people a year because of the fine particles. And this is, I had no idea about this, that the death toll in this region just for the fine particles, that's excluding the CO2 and all the climate change related, just the particles are killing 1,800 people a year. So since I sort of started discovering these facts, I couldn't quite believe it, and that's why I went further in my research. and it gets even mad, even more mad afterwards. It's so insane. So I was sort of trusting the government to take the
to protect
positive
us.
decision, but they are not. And we have to do something, because if we don't, I think we're in a really terrible situation. And that's what I sort of, that's my,
We'll
when
be joining the 1,800 people that die a year. I mean, just millions and billions more of us. It's really interesting because we sometimes say, oh yes, people get excited about terrorism and deaths from terrorism, as if people don't get energized about deaths from pollution. But people do get energized about deaths from pollution when they have access to that information.
Absolutely.
So I think not only are our governments coal captured to a degree, they are also, the media is also coal captured to a degree, in that they're choosing to focus on fear, or to feed fear and anxiety circles around terrorist threats, which are still threats, and I don't want to detract from that as a potential deadly factor in people, concern for people. But the number of deaths, was it 1,800 deaths a year in that region? You said?
Just for this mine, just for this site, for
just one
region.
mine. Okay.
Yeah.
Region with three attached. Four attached things for that region. 1,800 deaths from particulate matter, fine particulate matter. That is something to talk about, and the more we talk about it and create at least a parallel version of the media that engages with these issues, that won't be subsidized, won't have media magnates saying, yep, run a story on that, because media magnates, turns out, they're friends with coal magnates, and that they're in a big club of self-reinforcing deadly ignorance promoting to the public, or deadly concealment, that they don't, they run with that assumption we have, that comforting, naive assumption that our governments would protect us from something that is so profoundly deadly to humans.
And this, as you said, I think there's something very important about the media and our responsibility as citizens, maybe to do a bit more research, because all the information is there. It's not like it's not completely hidden from us, but I think it's our responsibility to sort of check and do a bit of research, maybe. When I mentioned the coal in Germany, a lot of people last year told me, oh, but I've heard the announcement that coal is over. And it's true, Merkel did a big announcement in January 2019 that they're going to phase out coal. Okay, so great news. This has hit the news. Everyone thinks it's over. The detail is that the phasing out is going to be done in 2038. So in 19 years from now. So that changes everything, because it makes no, I mean, why make an announcement for something that will be effective in 19 years? That makes absolutely no sense. And in the meantime, everyone thinks, oh yeah, coal is over. And I thought so. But when you just read a couple of articles, then you realize it's not. They have no plans of any closure of any coal mine. They're actually building a new coal plants, power plants. And they have no objectives. And if the government, let's say in 10 or 15 years, changes their mind, they could do another announcement that, oh, maybe we're going to phase it out, we're going to delay for a couple of decades. Yeah. So it's, as you said, it's very important to look at the numbers, the statistics, the science, because the phasing that was announced is not going to happen for another 19 years. And that makes absolutely no sense to me.
I'm so glad I connected with you and am talking to you now, because I also have distanced myself from Europe. I thought, oh, well, countries in Europe have got the hang of this. They understand that climate change is a problem, so they'll be taking action. But it seems that some of that action is also window dressing. So even as I spend my time worrying about Donald Trump and thinking, oh, well, maybe if we expose Donald Trump for being such an obvious criminal, then people will start to come more to an understanding of the need for climate action. It's like, no, I cannot think that, because even in countries where there's not an obvious mob-captured criminal in charge, governments are still under so much pressure to pacify the coal industry and maybe pacify donors from mining industries. I don't know why even Angela Merkel would be making an announcement that lulls people into a false sense of security like that?
Yeah, it's I don't understand either. I think the politics in Germany, it's quite complex because the mine is also owned 50% by the government and 50% by RWE. And RWE and the mine are owned by mostly by BlackRock, this investment fund in the
Yes.
US.
Yes, and
And
BlackRock wants to divest from coal now. I
they
think is the
announced
new.
today that they want to put climate change in the heart of their decisions.
Their investment strategies, yes.
Yeah, which, to be honest, well, it's PR, but I want, yeah, I wouldn't trust any words. I think it's good that the word is out there because they're sort of setting a trend. But if there's no objective and no enforcement, it's absolutely
Yeah,
meaningless.
then there's no accountability. There might be no achievements.
So there's a side story. There are many side stories to this mine in Germany, but one side story I discovered is this company, this software company called Autodesk. They actually put on their website a success story about how their software is being used to make those machines. And Autodesk is a good case study because they do a lot of PR about sustainability, about being green, about all what the good thing they do in the world. And actually, they still provide software as we speak to the mining company. And it goes against their policy. So that's that was for me an interesting sub story to understand how companies position themselves in terms of PR. But actually, there's no enforcement. So Autodesk doesn't do anything to lower the CO2 emissions. But they do a lot of PR, but there's no connection between the PR department, which is marketing, and the sales department. So they still sell to the fossil fuel companies. So I've been doing this.
A dual leadership where you say something that presses the right buttons in people's minds. We call that greenwashing.
Yeah,
when
sure.
you put up a front to make it have the appearance of green concerns, but your conduct is not in any way scheduled around green concerns.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when I say green, I really mean livable concerns.
Yeah.
I mean contributing in a small way to the bigger picture of whether or not we survive as a species going forward for a number of decades.
Absolutely.
So here's a blog.
Yeah, so this is yeah, sorry. I'm struggling with the tabs. So after discovering this coal mine and the story with Autodesk and doing some research about the pollution, I started going more and more regularly to this this coal mine and to make some images. And I also started making some projections. You can see here, it's a laser projection in the coal mine. I was supporting an action from Gelände, which are amazing activists. They actually go down into the mine, into the train tracks to stop the trains from bringing the coal into the coal plants. So they do on-site actions, and I found this incredibly inspiring. So as an artist, I also try to support those groups. Here is another projection I did on the Parliament in London during the Extinction Rebellion actions in October. So these are the different things I try to do. It's all sort of around this problem of the coal, which for me is very symbolic. But I started doing. To be honest, I don't really know what to do. As an individual, it feels almost impossible to do something significant. So I'm trying a lot of different things. I go on site, I take some drone videos, I make Twitter threads, and I think it's important if, as a citizen, you could feel powerless. But I think actually, as soon as you start doing something, it becomes being significant.
Well, yes, I saw a Twitter comment that somebody posted the other day. I think it was a comment from an American senator or congressman who said that hope stems from action.
Absolutely,
that when you commit yourself to doing some action, when you even take the first step, it gives you energy to do more, because it resolves your internal conflict about whether or not you're good enough to do anything, whether you should have done something before or whether you should do something in the future. You have done something. You commit to that course of action just by taking a step, and that emboldens you to do more. And it makes sense of it for you that, yes, you are not, in a way, taking a small action anchors your perspective and your smallness in the bigger picture. It goes, yes, I cannot control everything. You don't get despondent that everything is not perfect. You say, yes, everything is imperfect, and I am one small actor taking this step, this thing that I have done. And what you have done is you have not only amplified some of the details for people, but you have brought organization to protesters. And it sort of legitimizes their efforts in a way when people can say, yes, here is a mass of people, but then here is this big projected symbol that's uniting them. So they can protest at nighttime and they can look like they've created something, like they have creative energy, because all our energies to address climate change is a question that's difficult for people to contend with, because it's a question that says, is industrialized society inherently wrong and damaging? And people don't want to answer that question and say, yes, there's something wrong with us and wrong with what we have and wrong with what we've achieved. It's comfortable to push that away, but to make it action piece by piece and to say, we're raising awareness of these issues, because it's not just about our consumption habits and whether or not we personally can stop eating meat and stop flying. It's also about what we advocate for amongst ourselves as citizens, as individuals who are still groups, part of larger groups of families, of communities, of voting bases, that are the only way to bring about effective change. Individuals can start change, and individuals are still critical to bringing about change, but it's not just our local actions, it's our philosophical actions, the way we bring people on board with what we're doing, bring people on board with a narrative that becomes persuasive, that overcomes people's discomfort with having to reject an element of our lives. Because when we're criticized from people on the right, they'll often say, no, we are the creators. We do things and you just complain and you're hypocrites because you live in the modern world. So for us to be able to say, yep, and we will use those tools of the modern world, projection technology, the internet, communication technologies, to raise awareness and to anchor this issue in something concrete that we can do, to say broader action is needed, and we believe that. And we believe that the more people know, the more people will join on board with this and build a momentum to bring about change. Because also people don't want to do things when they feel like their actions are being wasted. Some people are reluctant to deprive themselves of things, even if they believe in climate change, because why should they deprive themselves when everybody else is still doing it? And you hear that argument a lot from climate change deniers or obstructionists who will say, well, what about China and India? And it's like, no, we in Western industrialized society still consume a lot more or emit a lot more greenhouse gases per capita than people in China or India. And they are taking steps as well to try and deal with this existential problem that will kill billions of us. So I'm glad I'm talking to you. I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I think it's also, I realized recently that technology has made me very individualist as a person. The technology brings you a lot of confidence, and these tools are amazing. You can, from a phone, you can reach thousands of people. It gives you a sense of, of power. But I realized when I followed the group from Under Gelände, the power of group actions and how important it is to maybe reconnect with groups, with people, with communities, because I think the real strength, the real power, I think belongs to the people, belongs to the population, and we can. We shouldn't underestimate the strength of the group, and so I followed Under Gelände last June.
Yes.
Let me see. I'll do just
literally followed them on their quest.
Yes.
Yes.
A little bit like an outsider, because I was not dressed like them. They have this white outfits, which is symbolically, and they go here to block the tracks. It's a chase also with the police, because every year they've been doing this, and the police is really heavily trying to stop them with hundreds of policemen every year. So I've started following them and sort of documenting their actions, and this has given me a lot of hope to see all these mostly young people, which seem to be the generation that is more concerned that us maybe. And I found that very inspiring to see people in their 20s sleeping on train tracks at night to stop the train from burning the coal. I found this symbolically so strong and so moving that I think that's what sort of switched me into a full-on activist, because now I want to be helping them, and I want to do my part, and I want to do whatever it takes to stop the coal from being burned. And of course, it's a symbol. There are a lot of other issues like social justice and a lot of other problems that we have to tackle. But for me, I sort of found
you found your tribe, and you found meaning in action, and it was their action that woke you to, I guess, to people's ability to devote themselves to a cause larger than themselves. It probably highlighted for you that this is kind of like the Vietnam of our era, when young people were motivated to protest that war because they were at risk of dying. Not all the people protesting had been drafted, but they could see that there was a risk involved potentially for them. And then they were uniting for others whose heart went out to those others, knowing that they were being sent to war. And the young people of today who realize that, yes, their futures are on the line, and they can engage with the facts. They don't have calcified understandings of the world that exclude science. They've been to school and they've heard science, and they don't have any motivated thinking to get them to turn away from science. They haven't exposed themselves to the kind of right-wing conservative media that maybe people are more likely to read as they grow older, because when you grow older, you enjoy complaining about young people. And you enjoy being a conservative and saying young people nowadays, they're so idealistic, they're not practical. And so, yes, they do have some of that idealism. You're less weighed down by practical considerations when you were a young person before you've had a family. But those are the people who do raise your awareness about an unjust war that America was right to get out of, although then as now there's still transition issues. So we have to try and transition justly away from coal. And it was important, and they, to a large degree failed to transition justly out of Vietnam as well, without abandoning the people who helped Americans. So we've got similar concerns for our own lives. And I mean, I have 2 children, and I'm very concerned for their futures. And when they talk to me about wanting to have children, my 4-year-old daughter plays with dolls and goes, yep, I want to be a mummy when I grow up. And I fight back tears thinking, I don't know if that's going to be possible for you, because I've been to university and done a little bit of biology, and the people I met also studying biological sciences were telling me from their fields about what was happening to the oceans, and how much heat the ocean was storing, and how it's going to reach capacity, and then there's going to be all of this heat that we are not prepared to deal with.
Absolutely.
So yes, the people who, yes.
How what was the sort of switch for you? What is there a specific moment, a specific event that when you realized that it was time to act or to do something?
Yes.
For me, it was the coal mine, and I'm really curious to know what it was for other people, because I'd love to help my friends and people who feel this is important but are not necessarily taking actions. And I'm very interested into this sort of eye-opening moment, if there is any.
I was on the margins. I was just concerned in a general way. So university in 2000 2010 was where I was hearing that the situation was a lot more calamitous than most people understood.
Sure.
So I felt a little bit of responsibility then, like, oh, people don't know this. But I still didn't think that it had to be me telling people. I still was like, oh, maybe I just need to tell people I know and say climate change is a big deal. So that made me concerned about Donald Trump getting into power, because I understood that he was essentially for sale, and that he had even derided whether the concept of climate change and said that China were making it up to render the US less economically competitive. So I understood him as being a very big, powerful threat to our any hope that existed of the world being able to get its shit together enough to take action.
Yeah.
And that we would otherwise still be stuck in a mass of individuals who knew, suffering from guilt and anxiety about their own individual consumption habits, but nobody being able to get together a cohesive organizational force to make anything happen. And so then I was following information about Donald Trump. The day that made me an activist was the day I saw on Twitter somebody sharing an ad that had been put out online. And it was an ad in which, for Republicans and for Donald Trump, that said, here is footage of a criminal who was an illegal immigrant who had migrated to the US and been sent back over the border and had come back again and killed a police officer. You know, and Americans don't like that. A lot of them are very conservative. And there was this grinning footage of a grinning criminal saying, yep, will kill again if I get out. So, and the voiceover was like, this is who Democrats want to let into the country. They want more criminals to kill more police officers and to kill you, basically. It was very nakedly fascist propaganda. Yeah. They were prepared to say, our political opponents are literally killers who will allow killers to come into your home and kill you. And it was so confronting that I said, okay, at this point, I put a camera in front of my face and recorded my reaction to that and said, look, I'm a granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. And so I feel like it's my duty now, and the duty of anybody with any type of connection to the Holocaust, to say, we've seen this before. We know this propaganda. We know it's intoxicating and it escalates. Yeah. So everybody who knows anything about the historical information about the bent of this type of thing has to speak up now. And climate disasters feed into that as well for me, because it's ecocide, not just the planet. We talk about the planet a lot, and a lot of people switch off because they don't care about animal planet. But to say this is killing a lot of people already. I mean, attributing 26,000 deaths a year to climate change in a conservative estimate. But this is potentially going to kill so many millions more of us, all from this willful negligence and people who don't care about our lives, who will say literally anything. To capitalize on fear of terrorism, fear of fear of outgroups coming in and causing harm, as if we just have to protect a house from unwelcome guests, when countries are not houses. They're communities that are strengthened by people who bring their talents and their energies to a new country. Always the most attractive people are backpackers. Backpackers are often very beautiful. And you go, okay, that's because people who have something in them are more likely to leave and explore and go to new places. People who have a lot of inherent talent and skill and energy. And the same with migrants, people who take those risks and don't just collapse quietly and give way to whatever is oppressing them in their home country. People who make that risk, that leap of faith, people who add value. And so for us to turn migrants into an object of fear is all, to my mind, a distraction from climate change. Yeah. And it's taking all of that energy, that sort of misplaced guilt and fear and concern, and channeling it all against demonized groups, because fascist style leaders will capitalize on what there's an appetite for. So if there's an appetite to finding a villain that's more specific than saying, hey, we're kind of all a bit to blame here because we're all consuming energy and not really looking too closely where it's coming from. Rather than it being this diffuse enemy, you get this very specific enemy. And so that video I made of my reaction went a little bit viral at that time, and had 500,000 views, and that gave me a very powerful feeling for a day. So then I thought I will do this more, and I will take whatever audience with me from that video to do what now feels like my destiny, which is
I see what you mean.
Put whatever ability I have for stringing words together in a sentence, and whatever empathy I can bring to the table, and my willingness to share it and put it on camera and send it all around the world through the internet. That's what I can give to this ongoing war against the banality of evil, the banality of our own destruction that we're participating in.
It's very interesting to hear. As I was saying before, I'm not really sure what to do. No one really is sure what to do, because there's no recipe that will solve everything. But what I understood of that past year of doing a lot of activism is that as soon as you start doing something, you will find your own place, your own path. If people are listening to us but they're not sure what to do, it could be anything. If you're like a designer, you can make designs, you can make flyers, use your skills to do something. And even if it feels insignificant, the more you do it, the more it grows. And so I started following
everything that we do is telling a story. It's telling other people that we deemed it worthwhile to commit our actions to and our labor to. It's telling that story of it's important to us. And that makes people look twice. Why do you care so much? What information have you access to, pardon me, that I haven't seen? What do you know? And then we interest people more.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important as well to not just look young, but to bring older people on board, to have people who speak to their demographic groups, because people listen to those they relate to. So I'm inspired by young people, but I'm also really keen on amplifying older people who step up and say, I'm worried about my grandchildren, or middle-aged people who also say, I'm middle-aged, but I too don't see this as just pie in the sky idealism. I see this as a pressing present concern.
Yeah, no, I found it very inspiring to see what Extinction Rebellion does in London, because they've managed to have affinity groups of doctors. They have affinity groups of people who are part of the police and the military, and they are speaking out because as citizens they feel like they have they should do something.
A moral obligation. Yeah.
But they sort of getting together and they create these affinity groups. And I found this like super powerful to see the grandparents for future, the parents for future in Germany. And
it's so great to organize it into that affinity groups, because I haven't heard that term before, but that marshals together representatives to say, look at the numbers of these people. So you can find whatever group you need to look at and go, yes, there are the doctors. That's my tribe. If I wasn't sure that this was worth my time or my voice to speak up, there is my tribe speaking up. Yes.
Yeah. And I found this really encouraging as well. And I'm starting to also work with other visual artists, and we try to combine our skills. We use laser projectors or slide projectors on batteries.
You've got an affinity group of artists. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think even like everyone listening to us could start an affinity group and find like-minded people with similar skills and get together to do something. And
here, IT experts. Hey, John.
And I'm trying a lot of different things here. I'm projecting the logo of Autodesk, the software company in San Francisco, and I've started a conversation with the CEO asking why he's still supporting the coal mining when his policies and his websites are saying the exact opposite. So I'm not sure what the outcome of this will be, but I had
your art has the potential to unlock some consumer power, because your art brings more consumer awareness to the table, and then people are forced to confront that gap between their public relations department and their sales
Right.
department.
Absolutely.
And that's very important because why they're doing it is for profit. But it
Yeah.
changes the profitability calculations if you have mass boycotts or just mass shunning.
Yeah.
Even if it's not officially a boycott, even if people just go, oh, they do that.
No,
It
absolutely.
tarnishing people's brand is important to
Yeah.
change their profitability calculations so they don't just pursue profit at the expense of existence of human life on Earth.
Yeah. And at the moment, as you said, like profit is the main drive, and that's the main issue for CEOs and people in power to make powerful decisions. So very quickly, since what sort of triggered this conversation was boycott auto.
Siemens, yes. What a terrible name.
I'm gonna just very quickly show you, and maybe we can discuss how it worked with Autodesk. I did this presentation that I'm now sending to Autodesk employees because I think there's a strong chance that change can come from the employees, yes, as well as the consumers. But I think the yes, employees have a strong role to play. Yes. I've sort of did this presentation, which is summing up what I was explaining before, how I discovered the mine. I did this small video, which is a data visualization of the real-time CO2 emissions. This is in real time right now. It's 3 tons per second that come out of this mine. So I'm trying different means like video editing and data visualization to.
It's fantastic that you have the ability to do this. That you have access to a drone, and that you can use technology in this way to make it so potent for them. That's so good.
This site is not accessible to the public, and until drones were made available to artists because they're getting really cheap, these images were not. It wasn't possible to make them. So it's only been maybe 3 or 4 years that I have this tool that I could use also for this. So I think technology has a role to play. And I would even, I think also people making websites, creative coders, artists, people doing data viz, I think they could play a very interesting role in this. So after discovering the mine, I discovered this one PDF. It's still on Autodesk website. It's called a success story because they are providing software to the mine, and they were really proud. So I tweeted to the CEO, and he got back to me and said, "Oh, someone has to do it, and we give free software to startups." And I thought that was a very bad response, and I started reading Autodesk policy. And actually, they are supposed to establish annual targets to reduce their environmental impact and identify the impact of their operations. So I did a call with the sustainability officer at Autodesk, and I told the story for half an hour, and she seemed really concerned and really. She found this was really important, and she thanked me many times. And we had a follow-up call, and then she just canceled this follow-up call because I guess she can't do anything. She works in the marketing department, and there's nothing she can do. And the CEO is not willing to do anything because of the profit. His job is to make more profit for the shareholders. That's what a CEO has to do. So that's it. End of the story. They just completely stopped the conversation, and they don't want to speak anymore because they're not willing to make any change. So I continued my research, and there would be a long story about the villages and the churches being raised. This is a church from it was 112 years old, and it was raised 2 years ago. This is the church of Imerat. So it's completely heartbreaking, but as soon as you start doing some research, you realize that this is happening as we speak. Like they're still raising.
You got this footage. You we got the
This is the
footage.
footage from another activist, Arne Müssler, and a lot of people did some footage. And so I'm also working with other videographers and people who are also have similar concerns.
So that's very emotive, I would imagine, for a lot of Christians.
Yeah. And there's another church that will be raised in the next few weeks. It's called Mannheim, and I went to the last mass of Mannheim, and I saw old people crying because this is the church where they got married and where children had their baptism. And I'm not really a religious person, but this broke my heart so much to see these old people being so sad and seeing their villages being razed. And so I think there's also a lot of strong symbolic images and content here that people should be aware of. So I'm going again next month to do more images. I do 3D scans of the villages to keep a memory.
Does Greta know about your work? Has she seen? She probably has.
She knows very well about the Ambar forest, and she was actually in Ambar a couple of 4 months ago, I think, with Ende Gelände, and she did a speech there, and she's also trying to raise awareness about what's going on at this specific mine. And but yeah, she does more than Autodesk, for example. It's incredible. So just so I thought by showing these images to Autodesk, I thought they would be moved and they would maybe do something. And actually, the only thing they did was to remove the case study from their website. It's hard to see here, but the call PDF that was in their website is now gone. And I tried to post a message on the Autodesk forums, and as soon as you start talking about coal, they censor the forums. They just delete the posts, and they just don't want to hear about. They don't want anyone to hear about this coal story. Oh, I don't know if you're still there. Hello. Not sure what's going on. Let's hope the streaming starts again. Is there still people in the live comments who can still hear me? Okay, so I'm not sure if there's still. Oh yes, okay. So let's hope Daph comes back shortly. While we wait, maybe I could just very quickly wrap up the Autodesk story. Oh yeah, you're back.
I'm back.
Oh yeah, cool. So yeah, to be honest, I could go on. The Autodesk story could go on for like an hour, but I'm gonna just wrap up on that point to basically explain that since they censor the forums and they don't want to speak to me anymore, I went to their office in Montreal to try very politely to have to organize a meetup, and they just called the police. They didn't want to talk or to interact. So we organized a little pop-up exhibition outside their office with pictures from the mine and the drone images, and yeah, hopefully there's still no feedback from the CEO of Autodesk or from any of the executives, but I get a lot of messages from the employees, a lot of tweets, and a lot of very encouraging and very nice messages. So that's why I feel there's hope that Autodesk could hopefully drop their support to coal mining. I think the hope would come from the employees and also from the consumers. But that's what I'm
yes,
hoping.
we don't know what the terms of the contract. Do we know what the terms of the contract they've signed with the mine are?
So I think they're just supplying software. So if they wanted to stop their contracts, that would actually be very easy. They have the tool to do it. It's called the denial list, and they have a list of companies that they don't work with. And at the moment, on the denial list, it's only terrorist group or like politic groups of a certain category. And they could decide to put the oil companies, and I suggested to the CEO and to the CEO of the foundation, Linel, I suggested to add the 100 most polluting companies. And she said it was actually a good idea, and that she would talk to her CEO and discuss this. And then that's when they stopped all conversation. But I think
obviously said, I'm not ready for that. And we have to try and make the CEO ready for that by tarnishing their brand to the point that it becomes a commercial consideration for them.
You're right. Yeah. And I think so later on, I talked to one of the employees, was happy to have a call with me and give me a lot of insights. He's a senior executive, and he felt like he had to reopen the conversation anonymously. But we had this long call, and he explained everything. He explained that Linel is from PR, and that's why she can't do anything. And the CEO has to make sure that he makes more money for the shareholders, and he can't do anything. So this senior executive at Autodesk, he told me that the only thing to do is to increase pressure and to increase media coverage.
Yes.
And he said that it should be sort of easy, because the CEO is actually breaking every rule of their own policies, and he's also violating the code of conduct. So there's a code of conduct that says you should be exemplary, blah, 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 but it's PR. There's no enforcement. So he's breaking every rule, and no one seems to care very much.
So more broadly, we have to do this for all the companies that are facilitating the 100 most polluting companies, because we have circles of influence. If we can't get the 100 most polluting companies that owe their existence to being able to continue to massively pollute the world, we have to just transition to a point where we're peeling off all of the facilitators and all of the enablers, that we're working with people who aren't up to their necks in pollution as the central companies are. So we go for the ones we can and say, your reputation should matter to your customers, and we make it matter to their customers. So we show more images of coal mines, and we raise awareness that people near coal mines are dying. Every coal mine that's closed is saving lives, and that it's not just a long distant future that we can say, oh yeah, don't worry about that, cross that bridge till when we come to it. Listen to the denialists who tell you what you want to hear, that it's not a problem. We have to work out how to change that appetite for comforting lies into an appetite for viable action that can take off, that can hit a critical mass, because people don't want to do things when they think it's too isolated to make a difference.
Absolutely,
so we have affinity groups. I love this, that we have affinity groups that show people how numerous we are, how numerous are the decent citizens who say, it's a concern. It's not okay to ignore this problem. Not okay, not only for the children, but for literally us now, for the people dying now, and for the people losing years of potential life expectancy as a consequence of exposure to pollutants from coal mines.
Indeed.
When there are less deadly, less toxic ways of getting energy, to end the public subsidizing of the mechanisms that are killing us now and going forwards.
No,
so we're part of that. We're part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I keep. So if people are interested, they could go on boycottautodesc.com. So this is an example of the document I've put with. It's basically telling the full story, and there's a transcript of this interview with the senior employee. And I've made this little video where you can see Autodesk PR next to the coal mine activities.
You contrasted it. Yep.
It's only 50 seconds long.
That's good. That's a good timeline for people.
Autodesk, what's amazing about Autodesk, we actually do make the world better. We do actually make it possible for people to build more low-cost housing. We do actually help pollute the world with, less. We do actually make sustainable buildings that can actually power themselves and maintain their own existence without bleeding down the resources around them. So people come to Autodesk and work at Autodesk because they're really passionate about what our customers do. And we make the world better by making our customers make better, just helping our customers make better decisions.
So something I think very important here is sort of talking to the employees and explaining why the employees are happy to work at Autodesk. But I think the employees should also know that churches are being raised and 3 tons of CO2 are emitting every second. And I think this information should be being made accessible, available to the employees as much as what he's saying. I think he's a good guy. I think he's sort of is into the making, but he really underestimates the actual impact of his company and how we could make a better world. He uses these words. They all use the word make a better world, but
there's lots of ways that they can have moral diffuseness, that they can pretend to themselves that this stuff is going to happen anyway, that their actions have no moral consequence. But they do. They have real world consequences and they have moral consequences. The more they rationalize this to themselves, the more they're empowering themselves to do worse and worse things. Like it's a pathway of moral viciousness, really. So I love that you juxtapose that imagery of the consequences of their actions. The church is crumbling with his words about buildings and contributing positively to the world. I think that's so powerful. And I'm so I still have a cough left over from Australian bushfire smoke because it's really toxic for Australians, and a lot of people are just used to it now, or they don't expect to see blue sky, and they're not evaluating what this smoke is likely doing to them. And the awful thing is the government doesn't put out a great deal of public health warnings about it as well, because they don't want to deter tourism.
Absolutely, yeah. We have the same problem in Brussels. Of course, it's not comparable at what's happening now with the bushfires. But in Brussels, sometimes the pollution level goes above the limit, and they also don't do anything. They don't do anything about it. Sometimes they do a press release just to say the limit has passed, but they don't want people to be too concerned because then they would have to try to lower the number of cars in the city of Brussels and the lobbies.
They don't want to take action.
So they don't want this information to be known. And I'm really not not necessarily anti-capitalist and conspirationist or whatever, but since I know this mind, I'm just realizing that the state of the world and the media and the politics, it's so bad that
it is a conspiracy, and we can't use the term conspiracy theory as derisively as we used to, because it's not just for crazy people who watch Alex Jones on the internet.
No, exactly. Yeah, right.
There are conspiracies to deceive the public.
Absolutely.
You just have to do a little bit to muddy the water, because people already have an appetite for being comforted. They already have that narrative structure of believing that the government is looking after them. That everything's okay, because we make those decisions to continue on with our own lives without having to worry all the time that people are undermining us or undermining our health or our safety. We've had that. It reminds me of not passengers on the Titanic, but people watching the Titanic and saying, wow, what a great civilization we have. We're so adept with technology, nothing can harm us. And everything we do that's powerful right now, well, technology makes us feel powerful. So then that feeds our delusions that we can't be harmed.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are so many forces at work that are harming us and that are conspiring to keep the details of this harm from us, so that we don't start using our human abilities to address the problem.
Absolutely. And I noticed a pattern from these CEOs and people in charge. the one who shut down the conversation, and who needs to sort of keep the current status quo. And they're often like this guy, Andrew Anagnost. He earns $300,000 a month.
Yes.
The CEO of the bank BNP, which is the main funding for the mine, which allows, he also earns, I think, 350,000 euros a month. And there seems to be a threshold, like people under, I don't know.
Not a year, a month. Yeah, a month. Of course, it's
a month. Yeah. And they're willing to do anything they can to sort of deny the problem and not be part of the solution. I think there's a relationship between this enormous amount of money that sort of put them in a bubble, and they don't use their humanity and their common sense to save villages, churches, people's lives, because they are in this bubble of hundreds of thousands of dollars per month. And when you talk to employees that are more like, I don't know, like normal people under 10,000 a month or 2 or 3,000 a month, then of course everyone there has more common sense and can have, share values and stuff. But this threshold of money, that's the only reason I could find for them to be so blind, is this threshold of enormous amount of money that keeps them from their own humanity. And I'm not anti-money, but what the fuck? Why are they not functioning as human beings with emotions and empathy and understanding of what we face as human beings? And it's insane.
I'm very with you on that, and I think it's interesting because I'm from a Jewish background. I'm not a practicing Jewish person, but I'm really understanding some more of the tenets of a purer form of Christianity, in which, to my understanding, I'm not very good with the Bible, but that Jesus was arguing that wealthy people, to a degree, their wealth separated them from others.
Right.
Just that saying of something like, it's as difficult for a wealthy man to enter the kingdom of heaven as it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Don't know what any of that means, but it's from the Bible. I think I've got it right. And it means, what I'm guessing now is that it means he understood the psychological burden of wealth, that it makes it difficult for you to engage with your fellow people and difficult for you to relate to normal people's problems, because you're burdened emotionally by your wealth, and that your wealth is literally a weight on your conscience and your humanity. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's really important, because yes, those CEOs with those levels of salary, when I just say wealth inequality, it never made that much sense to me. I'm like, oh, whatever, they can have 50 houses. I don't care. As long as I feel safe and secure, they can have business. But now that I understand that their wealth imperils my safety and security, because their extreme wealth cuts them off from normal human considerations.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I had no issue in the past, as you said, with like people being like super rich, and I didn't really care. But now that I see how tight the connection is with the air I breathe in Brussels, because this guy in San Rafael, California, he doesn't give a shit really, because he has all these houses, and whatever country burns, he goes to his other house. Now I'm like, oh, there's really an issue there.
I didn't begrudge them the houses or the cars or anything. I didn't begrudge them any of that. But once I realized that those houses and cars make them not care if they kill me or not, not care if they kill my children, and not care if they kill my community or my country, now I go, okay, now I'm not cool with it. Now I begrudge your wealth, because your wealth is inoculation for your conscience from functioning as humans are supposed to function.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Wow.
Well, it's been so great to talk to you.
Yeah, indeed. Same. We could, we could do more.
I know you have to go somewhere.
Yeah, I have a show opening in half an hour in London in the Winter Light Festival in Canary Wharf. So that's a weird area to show some art, but I think it's
I love French art and how it just gets out into public spaces. It just goes all metaphysical and impressionistic at you, and you go, wow, so moving, lights.
Cool.
I saw a free French artistic exhibition years ago now, 2001, and
Right.
and it was some acrobats, and they were just hanging in this massive, enormous birdcage installation and ringing chimes, and I was like, "This is so French! This is so French!" And so, all the best for your exhibition, and go out and speak to the people and speak to their hearts. I'm excited for the millimeters that you change the dial, because art can reach so many. So it's a lot of millimeters.
Thank you. This circle you can see here on the screen capture is actually the beginning of this piece. It's called Constellation, and it's about the cosmos and geometry and the notion of sublime, how the elements, so it's a projection on a water screen, and it shows how the beauty of water and the beauty of the simple elements, and hopefully how important it is that we try to preserve nature and to be more sensible to the environment we live in.
Yes, we hope that some billionaire strolls past as well and feels a reconnection to human considerations.
I'll also keep doing Extinction Rebellion projections for the same billionaires to maybe think about how
that's where you reach them, because when you make your drone footage available enough to enough people that it builds pressure on their brand, that's when we really harness consumer power, as well as harnessing disgruntled employee power as well, who still have functional consciences.
Absolutely.
I like it. Get them from both angles.
Yeah, cool.
We don't know how to do it. We don't have a template for how to achieve this. This is an existential threat of a nature that hasn't faced humanity before, where our own inventiveness and our own ability to make things out of coal, to dig in the ground and use gas and oil and coal to power our lives. That our own ingenuity is also proving to be deadly. So it's a novel problem. We're feeling our way in the darkness, but we're doing it together.
Yeah.
The people we bring on board, the more chances of success we have. And I love your work.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have this exchange. And as you said, I think it's together that we can make something and we can change things. I'd love to keep in touch. And so regarding boycott Siemens, now I have a second mission as well as Autodesk. Right now it's just a domain name, and I'm going to work in the next few weeks with other activists and other groups and Friday for Future in Germany and groups in France as well. And whoever is willing to help to put more pressure on Siemens. I think we need creative people to make. I'm thinking of doing projections on products inside Siemens shops, or like in Brussels, there are a lot of Siemens products. So I'm going to do like improvised projections that maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure about the words yet, but like Siemens burns our future, or I have to work on those. But any designer that
I'm on board, and I will put a call out to anybody I know with any artistic capacity whatsoever.
Cool.
And
hopefully we can use this domain name to reach the employees and the consumers and also the CEOs to ask them to drop Adani project and create a better future, hopefully.
Yeah, resist.
Cool.
Do it. Cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you so much. That was a real pleasure.
We'll stay in touch.
Stay in touch, indeed. Cheers.
Fantastic. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.